Okay, so I have gotten requested a couple of times from different listeners to do a episode on making college more affordable. So I decided that I was finally going to do this topic. I got as much information as I could and I'm sharing from my experience also because I do have a son that's college age and I have a daughter who is college age who hasn't started yet but is looking to start. So I'm sharing what experiences that I've had and what I've found so far, and just kind of some general tips that I've kind of learned or heard of over the course of time. So my first tip, which I think is definitely pretty well known, most of these are going to be well known. It's more just kind of getting them into your mind and kind of just thinking about them and, not forgetting about some options you might have. So the first tip is to consider community college for the first 2 years. So we have 3 kids and we anticipated that all of them would attend 4 years of college. So our plan all along has been to have them attend our community college for the first 2 years. Because 3 kids times 2 years each at the much more expensive cost of a 4-year college was just too much for us to be able to save up for. And we're planning to do everything we can to avoid them going into debt for school, or at least them going into the least amount of debt as possible. So we've kind of always had that plan that they would do the first 2 years of college at a community college. So basically, as soon as they were old enough to start talking about college, we've always been kind of talking about those plans with them. So the thing is, when you get a college degree, your employer does not care where you attended the first 2 years of college. Your resume is just going to say whatever college and the degree. It doesn't say, 2 years at this community college and 2 years, it doesn't matter. It's just wherever you get your final degree from is all that employer is going to see. So why not save all that money and do the first couple years at a community college? Another thing is to just be careful about what credits will transfer. So if you do decide to do a community college or even just a less expensive school for a couple of years, maybe it's not a community college, maybe you attend a 4-year school for the first 2 years. Maybe you have like a state college that's less expensive and you decide to go there and then you plan to not complete it there, but maybe you're going to transfer somewhere else to save some money. Regardless of where you go, you really want to make sure you pay attention to what classes will transfer to your new school, because you don't want to have to take additional courses because the ones you took at the first school won't transfer. In New Jersey, where I live, there's a website called njtransfer.org that helps students pick class equivalents to meet the requirements of the college they plan to transfer to. So you can kind of say, like, I want to go for this degree at this school, and it'll show you what the requirements are and what classes you can take at the current school you're attending. Like you say, I'm attending this school and I want to transfer to this school for this degree. And it'll show you what classes you can take, including like the actual course numbers, to make sure that you take classes that will match up. And I would imagine that most states probably have something similar like that. But if you're unsure, of course, check with the college you plan to take your courses at and see if they can help you figure out the best way to make sure you get the most credit for the school that you're going to go to next. By the way, I'm speaking this podcast partially from the parent's perspective and partially as if I'm talking to a student. I doubt I'm talking to many students. I'm sure this is mostly parents, but I'm kind of probably going to be going back and forth between how I'm speaking, as if I'm speaking to you, the parent, or speaking to you, the student. So either way, it's the same information. Another thing you can do is to look into programs with other colleges through the community college. So for example, our community college has a program with one of our 4-year state schools where you can earn a degree from that state school through the community college at a much lower cost. Now with this program, there's a limited number of degrees that are available with that program. But if it happens to be a degree that you're looking for, that could be a really great option. So check to see what programs there might be, because like with this one, you get the degree of the state school, but you attend classes at the community college and you're getting credit in the program for the other school. So they have like a deal that they worked out together. So I know that a lot of schools do that. So that's definitely something to look into to see if that might work for you. Another tip is to apply for as many scholarships as you can. So this is one of those like do as I say, not as I do type things, because Up until now, I've had one child who has attended college. We did not apply for any scholarships. I definitely read and heard everywhere that we should apply for as many scholarships as possible. I had reminders on my phone to work on applying for scholarships on a regular basis with my son. Every time I looked into scholarships, I felt totally overwhelmed and thought that some of them were so specific that I would be spending so much time applying for ones that he would likely never get. However, I think if I had more guidance on how to do this, it would have definitely been a great thing to try. At the time, my son was about to start community college at a relatively low cost, and I wasn't super concerned enough to put in the effort to try and get those scholarships. So if you're feeling this way about scholarships, I would definitely suggest talking to a school guidance counselor or college financial aid office to see if they can kind of help put you in a good direction on what scholarships to start with, because doing it on my own, I definitely felt a little overwhelmed and then I just kind of avoided it. But if you can get some free money to assist with education, why not? Another thing is make sure to fill out the FAFSA. So if you're not familiar, the FAFSA is the free application for student financial aid. The first time I had to complete the form, I was definitely intimidated, but it really wasn't hard to do at all. You can save your progress, like you file it online, you can save your progress if you need to find information like a bank statement or something like that. And you can import your tax information right from the IRS, so that made things easier too. I didn't have to worry about like putting the numbers in the right spot or misinterpreting something. It just pulled in the tax information and put it right where it belonged on the form. And the reason it's important to complete the FAFSA is because it's required for students to be eligible for certain grants, scholarships, and loans. So while you might not think your child will need or qualify any of those types of financial aid, it's still best to just complete the form just in case, because it would be terrible to not qualify, especially for like a grant or a scholarship, just because you didn't fill out the form. And the form is something that you need to complete annually. Another tip is to consider using a 529 plan to save for college. So now this, of course, you would have to have done already in the past. If you're about to attend college now, this isn't going to help. But if you're in a situation where you're going to be saving for your children to go to college in the future, using a 529 allows you to put money aside for college and you do not get taxed on the growth of those funds. I'm not a tax expert. I don't know if there's any exceptions to that, but generally my understanding is that it's kind of similar to like a Roth IRA where you save money for college in the account and you do not get taxed on the growth of those funds. So say you put $1,000 in the account and that grows to $3,000 over the course of time, you won't be taxed on that $2,000 of income that you earned as long as you use that money for education expenses. And it doesn't have to be specifically for college. It can be used for private schools, trade schools, etc. The only thing I can say about a 529 to be really thoughtful about is making sure you get the money out to pay for education, like to really plan that and don't kind of hold it aside. At least that was my experience, unless you're definitely certain you're going to be using it. So for example, when my son started school, rather than pull the money out of the 529 account, I thought it would be a good idea to just let that money sit there for when he transferred to a more expensive school. So he was going to community college and working part-time and paying the cost of his school. So I just said, you just keep paying for what you can and we'll keep the money in the 529. That way, once you go to a more expensive school, we have all that money sitting there. Well, it never occurred to me at the time that he might decide not to continue with traditional college education and that money would potentially not be needed in the future and we'd have a hard time figuring out how to get it out because we wouldn't have as much college expenses as we thought we would. So he has since decided not to continue the path I thought he would, and I now have this money sitting in the 529. So fortunately, I can transfer that to my daughters, who will hopefully use it. But had I thought about it earlier, what I would have done is, even though he was paying for the cost of the college out of working part-time, I would have still used those expenses that he incurred to reimburse ourselves for the money that he spent and pulled that money out of the 529 account, and I could have just put it in a regular savings account to set aside for him for future college costs rather than let it sit in that 529 account, because you have to show the education expenses within a 1 year period. I think it's in like the tax year. There might be like a little bit of overlap, but when you can make the request, like say if you pay something in December, you can request it like a little bit into the next year, I think. But either way, it's not like I could go back to the first 2 years that he paid and then go back and request that after the fact. You can't do that. So I really should have just, as soon as we started having education expenses, I should have just started pulling the money out of the account to cover those, and then just put that money in a separate savings account to save for his future, rather than thinking that we would definitely have these additional education expenses in the future that money would be used for. So, it depends on your situation. Of course, if you are certain that you're going to be using that money in the future, then that might not be a bad idea, but just really consider if you might end up in a situation where you're not going to have additional education expenses in the future, and maybe you might want to try and get it out as soon as possible on earlier education expenses, because if you have to pull the money out, say if you aren't going to have education expenses and you decide you're going to pull the money out, you're going to get taxed on that money, and then you're also going to have to pay a penalty. So it's important to really plan as best as you can to make sure that the funds will be used on education. Another option is to work part-time. So I know that this is not for everyone, but working part-time can be a great option while attending college. My son worked part-time while attending community college. I set up a budget with him so that he had a certain amount of money for personal expenses, gas, car insurance, etc. And then whatever was left after the cost went towards college. So by doing this, we were able to keep what he had saved for college to help him when he transferred to a more expensive school. And like I said, I should have pulled the money from his 529 account when we had the expenses to show and put it in a regular savings account. But the point was that basically he was able to cover the cost of his tuition without dipping into his other college savings that we had saved up for him. And we had agreed that we would cover any shortfall he had each semester when the tuition was due. So it's not like he was under a tremendous amount of pressure to work enough to pay for the whole bill, but it was more just being mindful with his money and making sure he put aside everything available to go towards that college, expense. You can also consider looking for a job with tuition assistance. If you're not committed so much to whatever, if you are working and you're not super committed to the specific company or field that you're in, a lot of jobs do offer tuition assistance for their employees, and that can be a great way to get some of that college costs covered. They usually have maximums, a certain dollar amount per credit and then maybe a certain dollar amount per semester. So you might have to kind of manage that to get the most you can. Maybe you do, you make sure you have enough savings for the difference, or however you want to manage that. But it's always a good option if you want to maybe see if you can get an employer to help pay for the cost of college. Another option is to take less classes. This kind of depends. It kind of goes along with working part-time. Like if you're working part-time, you might want to consider taking a lighter class load just because of the fact that you are working also. But even if you're not working part-time, if you can only afford to pay for 4 courses instead of 5, why not maybe consider taking 4 courses? Then it allows you to spread out the cost over more time, allowing you to save up more for additional, save up additional cash for more courses in the future. Yes, it will take longer to complete college, but if you're trying to keep the cost more manageable and you don't want to go into debt, this could be a good option. If you're staying on campus, this might not be the great idea because there is the cost of housing to consider, but I would say if you're commuting to college or if your child is commuting to college, it might be a good option to spread the classes out over a longer period of time to allow yourself a little bit more time to save up the money to pay the cost of those classes. Another tip is to consider living at home or off campus. I understand that it's very important to some people to have their kids have that college experience. I personally commuted to college, so I don't really know what that experience really was, but I can tell you that I do not feel in any way like I missed out on anything by not going and living on a college campus. So if this is not something personally particularly important for you and your family, definitely maybe consider living at home or at least in a less expensive off-campus location, because this can save so much money. The cost of living on campus adds so much to the bill each semester. I haven't personally had that with my children because I haven't had anyone live at campus yet. But I've seen the costs when I reviewed the cost of colleges, and it's definitely a big additional expense. And then my last tip about making college more affordable, which isn't really college, but my tip is to consider trade school. So trade school is a great low-cost option for those who are interested in training for certain careers. Like I said, my son was going to community college for 2 years and just decided that it really wasn't for him. He is a really smart kid, but he just was not really interested in any particular path. And he had a lot of different ideas, but he wasn't really excited about anything in particular. And he was just kind of going and didn't really have like something like an end goal. It was just kind of going because he was supposed to go. So one day I was browsing through the catalog for our local vocational school and showed him an apprenticeship program that they had for becoming an electrician, and he was immediately interested in it and started asking for more information. And it was the first time I had seen him have like a really strong interest and be really excited about a particular career path. So he's going to be he's actually going to be attending that starting in the fall. So we're really excited about that. And so just keep your options open. You never know what might be the right fit. It doesn't, depending on the job or the career path you want to take, traditional college doesn't always have to be the way to go. And the trade school is definitely very affordable. So that's all I have to say today about keeping college affordable. If you have other tips, I'd love to hear them. Don't forget, you can always email me with any questions or suggestions at lolasfrugallife@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at lolasfrugallife. You can find blog posts for each episode on my website at lolasfrugallife.com, and you can join our private listeners group at facebook.com/groups/lolasfrugallife. If you enjoy the show, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen from. And I would love it if you would screenshot the show and tag me on Instagram. Also, if you can please take a couple of seconds to rate and review the podcast, that would be really helpful to me. Getting those ratings and reviews is what helps boost my show in the search results so we can grow our audience. Also, don't forget to check out today's sponsor at shop.analuisa.com/Lola. And if you're interested, there is a link in the episode details to financially support the podcast. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a really awesome day.